All right. Well, Patrick, in theory, we are live. So thanks to the folks that hopefully can see us and hear us. We did a little bit of audio video check. So in theory, we are, we know what we're doing. Patrick from CAS Iberia is joining me today for this random ramble stream. And I'll start off by asking him to introduce himself and tell us about what he does.
Well, I'm Patrick Shipley. I guess my official title is product marketing manager, whatever that means. I take care of photography, catalog stuff, website stuff, marketing, advertising, do some social media, kind of handed that off a little bit. And, just the general day-to-day. I handle all international sales, work in product development. I've been doing that a lot here in the last year and a half, I guess a year, something like that. I can't remember. But like you said, we wear a lot of hats at CAS. Occasionally I'm the janitor. Occasionally I've somehow managed to push off plumbing issues onto somebody else, but there we go.
Marketing manager, product manager, international arms dealer / janitor.
Ninja for hire.
There we go. Well, I appreciate you joining me, Patrick. I appreciate it. Patrick and I have gone back and forth a little bit over email to orchestrate some of the potential topics of conversation. And for those that watch my ramble sessions, you know that talking to somebody who has been in the sword business as long as Patrick, it should not be terribly hard to occupy the time with sword nerdery conversation. So Patrick, I know I sent a laundry list of questions at you, and we may get some in the chat. I'm notoriously bad at chat as well. So if you see any question that, piques your interest, feel free and point it out, because it's entirely possible I will miss it. But was there any part of the conversation, anything that I sent your way that was of particular interest to start with?
Well, the one thing that struck me odd is you kept talking. You mentioned loose Ito a lot, and we don't really see that a lot, and it spawned me to reach out to our warehouse people, who usually anything unusual. Did you freeze up there?
Nope. I just have a very straight face. I'm paying deep attention.
Okay.
I'll pick my nose just so that you know.
Okay. All right. Well, just in case it was me, I was kind of like dragging it out, but I have good Wi-Fi or good strong signal here. Loose Ito is very rare. I asked, we talked for a little while today, and I say, what do you, how often do y'all see, loose Ito on a katana? And they said, they thought about it, and it's like 1 in 500. So it's pretty rare for us. Our three main quality control issues are: number one is rust, high carbon steel blades. 2, scratches on blades. You get psi rub and things like that. And 3rd is lacquer finishes. So the whole loose Ito thing really kind of caught me off guard, because I'm like, I've seen some wonky wraps during the pandemic. I saw some wonky stuff, and because it was a pandemic, and like every manufacturer, we have issues. What I would like to know, and if your listeners want to chime in on this, I'm just kind of curious. What do y'all think? We go from deciding to make this katana and putting it out to the market. I'm just curious, people, what they think that process is. How do you think that works?
How do I think it works?
Yeah. So we decided to make a product.
Sure.
How do you think that works?
Well, it's probably going to be easier for me to answer. There are 12 people watching at the moment. Hopefully we have more folks join later, but I'm
I
going to
like
speculate
quality
that
over
it's going to
quantity.
be tough to have them type it out. But anyone that's listening along, if you want to type out how you think it works, feel free and join the conversation. But I would guess that there is probably some sort of close to bar stock that is used. I'm guessing you don't start from like a small ball or something like that, but that there's something that with minimal forging can be have the bevels forged into it, and that gradually that it's probably forged to shape reasonably close. That then there's some level of sanding and then heat treatment that takes place, and then once the heat treatment is done, the blade is probably polished. I'm also speculating that the fittings, or rather the fittings, are probably cast in various batches of sizes, which would equate for why some early versions may be more crisp or have more detail in them than others, and that the handles, sayas, and all of that are probably not built onto this specific blade that they go on, but also subsequently made to a template. I'm guessing that the blades are probably filed or sanded down to fit a template shape and size, and then they are fit into the various handles, which are probably made by hand and have various tolerances that they work within. But I'd guess that the scabbard, the grip, the fittings are all assembled basically as separate pieces, and then at the end assembled into one. Is that close?
Yeah, pretty close. I was thinking a little bit more broad than that, but that's pretty much, it's kind of how it works on the assembly side.
I'm an in the weeds kind of guy generally.
Yeah. So basically, when we decide to make a product, say we're going to make, this katana. So we look at, we get all the details together about it, and we figure out, well, it's going to cost this much. By the time we get in the country, it's going to be this much, and this is how much it's going to sell for. So we'll say, well, at this price, we think we can sell 200 or 300. We'll just say 200 just for example's sake. Well, those first 200 come into the country. Takes about, from product development to it actually hitting our docks, about a year, maybe a year and 2 or 3 months, depending on the complexity of the product and what we're asking for. So it comes in, it hits the market, and it's out there. And then market loves it, great. If there's problems, it's usually when we first hear about it, because even though everything is checked as it goes out the door, there are certain things you can miss. Granted, sometimes you get it right off the bat. You hit a home run, you got it right, perfect, nailed it first time. That's not always the case. Sometimes you get a product, it's like, oh, wish we should have done that. The other thing, when we try to order like a year's quantity, because we have well over 1,000 products. So it's not like they can, Hanway can be cranking out all of their SKUs at the same time. Dragon King can't be, producing all their SKUs at the same time. They set up and go in production runs. So it was like when the factory fire happened in 2011 at Hanway. Well, not all the product tooling didn't burn up because it wasn't on the floor when it went up. So they had to retool all the stuff that was on the factory floor. So just segue of information. So from the time that the product has hit the market, and they've probably started moving on to another product, or if this one's taken off, they may be getting it going again because we may have placed a reorder. But by the time we find out, usually there's a problem with the product, when we're talking about quality control. I mean, it's already gone, or we're already sitting on a year's worth. So by the time that we get back to the factory, or any factory, it's like, hey, we got this issue. We got to get so they got to stop. or they may not stop at all. They may not be able to stop depending on where they are in the production process. Like, okay, well, we're too far along. We can't address this now. We're cutting, the handle's wrapped and we're, cutting saya, whatever. So it could be literally a year and a half, maybe 2 years before we can address any type of issue, because product's already been made. We've probably already sitting on a ton or a year's worth of supply, however you want to say it. So it's like an oil tanker. To get some things fixed, it might take 2 years, because either inventory or just where they are in the process, of manufacturing. But typically the three things that we see are rust, scratches, and enamel issues. So
that would make a lot of sense, though. So loose ito, there may be a your definition versus mine type situation. And I want to preface that when I say loose ito, I do generally mean by the standard I would judge I'm not holding it against a $5,000 custom piece, right?
no, I'm with you. Well, and let's talk about just the finicky nature of a katana. I mean, it's not like owning any other kind of sword. If you're a guitar person, it's like having a semi-hollow body. They're very finicky when it comes to like humidity and things like that. And I'll give you a story. Not that long ago. Now, obviously, where Dragon King and Hanwei are in China, it's they have a monsoon season, very high in humidity. And not that long ago, we got a shipment in, and we had several katana that just needed to be shimmed. And they shimmed them up, and they came in the next day. They had to be shimmed again because like they were shrinking, because of the humidity. It was just coming out of them. And and I just wonder, where, and I ask, where are you in the world that your brand new katana that we sent you, it's if it's loose, where are you? Are you in Arizona? Are you in Flagstaff? Are you in Southern California, Texas?
That
Where are you in
probably
the
brings up
world?
a second point that's worth calling out. So, of the katana that I have owned, and
Mhm.
I've owned, it's more than 100 Hanwei products over the time, but the vast majority of them have been secondhand. Now, some of them have been safe queens that have sat for a decade or more. Some of them have been things that were bought new from a distributor and then sold to me because they didn't like them, and are I would say effectively new, right? I may have had a stopover somewhere else for a month, but it wouldn't be dissimilar from sitting in a warehouse, in the area. So it is worth noting, though, that the vast majority of my experience has been with secondhand pieces. So I'm
Yeah,
in Minnesota, but where I acquire them from is also, all
you
over the
froze on
country.
me.
What's that? From Arizona?
No, you froze on me. You said, I'm from Minnesota.
I'm from I'm from Minnesota, but where I acquire them from is pretty broad. It could be further north than me in Canada. It could be somebody in Arizona or Texas. I peruse Craigslist and eBay and wherever I can find them, or various forums where people have them. I would say a pretty significant amount, though, are probably from
Texas
reasonably
and
humid
California.
climates.
Yeah, a lot of our swords have, two major states, definitely California and Texas. Big states, big populations. So they're coming from there. It doesn't surprise me. And and like I said, I talked to our warehouse people today, and and it's things that they look for. This is part of their everyday routine. So I would say, I mean, if you get one that's got loose Ito, I want to see it. I mean, I really do.
Okay.
Anybody listening, you know my name. I want to see it because, it's like I said, for us, it's a 1 in 500 thing that we find, according to my warehouse folk. So, and and they know their stuff. And
it'd be interesting to hear how they're defining. And I'm not saying that what their definition is wrong. I have a very limited view of the swords. I probably have more than your average customer, but at the same time, it's, you know, colored by the area that I buy them in, and that I certainly am buying them secondhand predominantly. But I would be curious about what is the tolerance. So if you are looking at Ito or somebody in your warehouse is, what's good versus bad? Where does one not, you know, make the threshold for sale? And that 500, the one out of 500, what made it bad? And, you know, by contrast, I've seen some. There was a Peach Monkey, really old sword, right? Probably a name you haven't heard in a while. And the Ito is still really tight on it, and tight in a way that isn't, you know, pristine. The idea of perfect for me, for example, would be that I could stand my fat ass on one of the knots and it wouldn't move, right? That would be the ideal. And in really expensive swords, or swords that have some person very competent at tying them, that has been achieved. You know, no matter how hard I push on it, I can't get it to budge. It's like a rock. I would say that that's not the standard. If I can push on it and it moves like less than a millimeter, I would say that's really quite tight.
Yeah. But I mean, and I asked them about, what are you doing? And, first thing to check is the knot at however you want to say it. Kashira or Kashira, however you want to say it.
I'm not going to bust your chops about pronunciation. I sound like a dork. I pronounce it all wrong, but.
Well, it's every time I talk to James Williams, he's like, Kashira, Katana. So I'm just like, I'm talking to regular people. I'm just going to say Kashira. So, they check. That's the first thing they check is the knot to make sure it is tight. And they do push, the Ito to see if it moves, it gives. And it's not really been, according to them, it's not been an issue. So it was, like I said, it was the only thing that concerned me, because it struck me as odd and rare. And, it's just something that just kind of stuck out. But the other thing I need you to also consider, and this is in any manufacturing, and, CAS is no different. No manufacturing company is any different. We're always fighting against the law of diminishing returns, especially when it comes to handmade products. And you got to understand, back in like October of '99, when I joined the company as a wee little chap, it's the start of the prime time for CAS and Hanway. And they barely had 100 products, just in the Hanway line. I saw the original practical katana with the stupid copper habaki on it, or not copper, but plastic habaki. That was a mistake from day one. I think there was like 100 of them made. If you got one of those, that's definitely a keeper.
I do have a pretty early one. I have an early one up here. For those that are unaware, I've prepared my wall of Hanway behind me, and so I do have some older gems here. If I grab some of the oldest ones, I'll bring these over for show and tell. You can all love the look of my sweatpants as I meander around, because I'm a classy guy. So here's one of the old. It's older because you can maybe see it has this style of Suba on it.
Oh, is that the flat with the hard
flat
edge?
Yep, reasonably hard edge on here.
Yeah,
but it has a copper habaki on it. Let's cover my face and see if it focuses.
Yeah, I see that. That's a good one to own.
She's an oldie but a goodie.
The intention of those originally was to be just disposable, and in essence, they still are. Use them and lose them.
Yes.
But anyways, back to what I was trying to say. I don't know how many guys that started in the late '90s are still there today. They may be long gone. China's like any other country. They got a young generation, that just like us, they don't want to work in factories. They don't work dirty jobs, and forging katanas is not forging blades is not a clean job. And so they're always having to train the next guy. And, every generation, something gets lost, then you have to go back and start, filling in those gaps and polishing and things up and as you go. So, but it's, something that every manufacturer has to deal with if you're dealing with handmade products, because it is handmade, and this has to remember everything and not a computer template or laser cutter or anything like that.
I'd imagine there's nuance to what comes into making so many blades and so many different product types and remembering all of it.
Yeah.
I remember it was a different sword manufacturer, but I remember him saying that like it takes a really long time to be able to grind the various shapes of blades that they produced. It was a European sword manufacturer. I don't remember if it's Albion or Arms and Armor or somebody, but it was commenting on how long it took to train somebody to grind in the lines. And I would say that perhaps a European sword, they change around in terms of shape and size, but there's also a lot of nuance. In particular, I would say with Hanwei, one of the features that Hanwei and perhaps Dragon King, I'm a little less familiar with Dragon King's offerings, but Hanwei's, they still offer a lot of variety in shape and size. A lot of manufacturers produce swords that seem to be kind of the same 28-inch sword in profile and thickness. And there's different materials and different fittings and stuff that are put on, but you don't see them change around in like length and girth and have as much variation in the styles and shapes that you see still produced at Hanwei. It's one of the kind of differences that I still think Hanwei does better than just about anyone else.
Well, I think one of the advantages that Hanwei has, they got the brand recognition for sure, and I'm sure there's still several people that are still there that are probably from the olden days that carry that load. But as far as quality control, I mean, it's a team effort. We have to watch it on our end. They have to watch it on their end. I don't know what all processes they have. I just know what processes we have. We tell them we're seeing this. We send them. We've known that the side sword had an issue, and we sent them probably 6 months ago the fix for it to remedy had a handle issue that was kind of reoccurring. So maybe this time next year we'll have one that's kind of revised grip. I don't know. I mean, it is something that we are vigilant on, because it is, for lack of better terms, it's made by artisans. There's not a machine there, that's just stamping them out. It's a guy who wakes up in the morning, smokes his cigarette, and looks at that pile of steel, and gets to cranking it out in the heat. So it's a rough and dirty job. I remember one time I was talking to Paul Chin at like the sword show in Vegas, and I said something to him along the lines of, "Man, I just don't understand how I said something stupid. I'm just going to be honest. I said something stupid that I probably shouldn't have in my ignorance, but he was a lot more tolerant of me back then. And I got an email from him like a few months later, or about a month or so later. I can't remember exactly when it was. He sent me this picture of just a pile of katana blades. He goes, not everyone that we forge actually makes it to be a sword. He goes, he just had remembered that comment that I made, and he's like, "This is what we have to deal with. This is like this much waste before you actually get one." And it left an impression on me. It was like sometimes you don't get it right the first time, and it takes some effort, and there is a lot of waste, and they do their best, and they've learned more over the years. But Frenchie Jen, who once was with Hanway, who started Dragon King, probably taught a lot of those people that too. Because he was Paul's right-hand man for years. So,
are Hanway and Dragon King the same company, or are they related in some way, or is it just in
the same town?
Same town, but I'm guessing because the Frenchie, I believe, is the gentleman's name, as you call him, had a lot of experience at Hanway. So, I mean, if I look at the swords, I would say that they look like they're probably from the same forge, or they have a lot of influence on one another. They seem like they're from the same company. Not that there aren't some differences in the steel or some of the parts used. Obviously, there's different fittings and stuff, but the same way Bouguet had a special line of swords, and those were produced by Hanway. It's almost a similarity in that way, in some of the ways that the handles are tied and the fittings are put on, and the way the fitment is done. It all looks very much like Hanway does.
Well, it's probably because Frenchie trained everyone at Hanway how to do
it. Story checks out. Looks. Where do you think as you hear finicky things about katana, It sounds like you have a lot more understanding about how they're made, and an appreciation for the effort that goes into them. And I don't, I know I nitpick a lot of things, but I also have a lot of respect for the people that go out there and make them. I understand it's not easy. It's easy to sit and bitch about it, but it's not so easy to pound it out. Where do you think there's the customer's right, in the sense of like, hey, we could do better on that, versus, hey, this is not an expensive thing and you should count your blessings that it exists at all? Like, can you name some examples where one falls into the one camp versus the other?
Let me segregate this a little bit, because you got European products. I mean, we got Asian products. Then you got your oddball kind of stuff like APOC. On the Japanese side, I think when you get close or over $1,000, be picky, because it's not a small investment. If you're spending $3,000-$4,000, be very picky. But I think anything $600, $500 or less, it's kind of hard. A majority of the cost of a katana is the blade. We're talking like 85%, really, depending on the blade steel and the polish. Because if you look at, let's just do an apples to apples comparison. So you take Hanway. So an entry level katana for Hanway is what, $500? What's the street value going now? $400
or $500, somewhere in there is probably going to be the Raptor, or the practical line is going to be
let's just say the practical.
Find them in the threes anymore.
Yeah, let's just say the practical series. So you're looking at $400-$500. Well, all those products by Hanway in the practical series have synthetic handles, nylon wrap, fake SMA. Like the practical is glued on. So that's what you get from Hanway. But if you look at Dragon King and you look at the seasonal katanas, like the Winter Sun, the Spring Sakura, the Autumn Leaf, and the Summer Lotus, for $400 or $500, you can get a katana with all traditional products. A real wood handle, real ray skin, real Ito. To me, it boils down to value for the money. I mean, if you want synthetics because you're cutting and sweating and you're learning, then that's more ideal. But if you're wanting a real katana for value for the money, I think Dragon King's where is the value is. Now, Dragon King has obviously this past year really upped their game by bringing out more folded steel katana with the Kawana Kajima, the Tairu, and what's the other? the Kenru. So, so they're playing in that over $1,000 market, and hopefully we'll have some newer products to introduce sometime next year. But to me, when you're shopping for a katana, I mean, to me it's about value for the money. I mean, do you care? I mean, do you care that it's real raised skin or not? Do you care if it's real Japanese cotton or not? So, I mean, and Hanwei has the brand recognition of reliability, which is great, and Dragon King is earning theirs.
That's a fair question. I think in the $400 or $500 range, I certainly preferred, but a lot of I would rather have synthetic material tied really tight than Japanese cotton that maybe is a little easier to push around. I'd rather have a synthetic handle that comes off and isn't like rusted or glued on. I'd rather even have a plastic habaki if it means that the fitment around the koiguchi and kind of the tension area is correct and not loose, and that the sugikor isn't cracked, which is another thing that I would say would pop up more often than I would expect. Granted, I'm talking about swords that are secondhand and maybe have sat in a safe, gone through different humidity changes, but when I take them apart to clean it, it's a sword that effectively hasn't been used, but has aged and sat there for a decade or so. Taking it off the handle is cracked in some way. And
we were talking before we got on the show, talking about, gifting everybody at Christmas time. Well, I did make the unfortunate gift of a practical katana to my father one year. And I asked him, I think it was like a year later, I said if he still had it. Man, he pulled that thing out of the sheath. It had legs. I mean, it was just like all gunked up, and it was hairy from where the rust had just eaten away at it. He just stuck it in a closet and didn't even think anything about it. I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm sorry for that sword. It's like they went through all that effort just for him just to ignore it in a closet.
That's sad.
It's terrible.
I haven't had that. I've made the sometimes scabbards, like if I buy a sword and it's rusty and has rust issues, then it can be really challenging to get the rust to stop if there's some sort of moisture or gunk or something that's like really stuck in there. I almost have to take like a .22 rifle cleaner and kind of score out the scabbard a little bit, or take some sort of coat hanger and then like leave it upside down to dry in a room with a dehumidifier in it or something like that. But it can be really problematic to get that stuff to stop if it's originating from the saya.
I used to have an old Dragon Tanto, one of the original 1100 series. I had the Dragon. I forget which model that was. I had it for years and years. And in the last couple of years that I owned it, it had a dark spot, kind of kept creeping up on it. I wound up, because I couldn't keep it to go away, I wound up getting rid of it, because at that time of my life, I had little kids, and I was like, I ain't got time to be checking on this thing every 6 weeks, and I sold it on eBay. But once that kind of stuff kind of starts, it's kind of hard to get the genie back into the bottle.
It is. I would say that loose ito, I think if you're open to having people reach out to you when they encounter it, you'll certainly hear it. It's good to know somebody's interested in seeing it, and I imagine you'll have some examples on your desk by Monday.
Well, that'd be great, but I want to make sure that they're, if they bought it within the last, this last year. If you bought it 3 years ago and it's loose, it ain't gonna do me any good now. But if you bought one in the last, we'll just say in the last 8 months, I'd like to know where you bought it from. I want to see who you got it from, and what it's in, because within a year, it should still be good, unless you're living in like San Antonio or Albuquerque, New Mexico, and you got it sitting on your living room window shelf or something like that, where it's just getting the everything sucked out of it. Because I mean, that race skin will dry out too. Disappear.
The other quality issue, I've talked about some of them, and I think you've kind of made the point about Ito. But the L6 swords, if I think about the kind of the one quality issue that stands out, if I think about Hanwei, and as I talk about like Hanwei as a brand, right? What do you get? Well, you know, a $300 sword with some loose Ito that maybe you have to lacquer. In fairness, keeping you next to the competition, and I would say that's a problem across the board, right? I can't think of a person that makes a $300 sword that 10 times out of 10 delivers a handle that's tight. My experience with Huawei has been pretty solid, but apart from them, and I've had very few $300 examples as opposed to dozens from Hanwei. So I can't necessarily do an apples to apples. Still, the point is that cracked handles, things that are, you know, loosen up, sire rub, those are things I run into pretty commonly. And so I wouldn't say that Hanwei stands out necessarily in that regard. Unfortunately, I'd love to say that, like, hey, you're more than likely not going to encounter that. And there's a bit of variation in there. And hopefully you get some examples that help you fine tune the process. The L6 katana, though, was the one that really stood out to me. And it's been more than 3 years. And it was a sword, again, that I bought, and it was pretty new, but secondhand. And I did a cut and I bumped my stand. And to preface, it's a me problem, right? Like I whacked a wooden stand, didn't mean to hit it, cut went deep, hit the stand. However, hundreds or thousands of Hanwei swords at this point have whacked that stand, right? And it's the only sword, I think the only sword even still, that has taken that kind of edge damage from, you know, basically bumping with the grain into my stand.
Is that the one you said that rolled?
Yeah. Yep. And it took a pretty sizable rollover on that blade.
What year was this?
Well, let me see. I'd
be curious to know.
So I made the video. YouTube doesn't tell me things.
Good old YouTube.
I made the video a good long time ago. I'm trying to see if there's a. I mean, it's probably close to 10 years ago now. But
okay.
Unfortunately, you know, I wouldn't be able to tell you for certain when that particular Oni was manufactured. I sold it. I got rid of it. I didn't want to look at it anymore. And I don't know that I have, like, there might have been a date on the tang or something like that. And I'll look and see if I have pictures for you. But I do know that the polish was, they changed over time, but it had a very coarse surface on the shinogi. So it was almost like a sandpaper style polish. So that I don't know if that's an earlier or later example, but it rolled pretty substantially. The following Oni katana that I had, the kashra fell off after I was using it a little bit.
Weird.
That was a loose Ito thing. But I've also had the mantis, which is made out of the same steel. And while I didn't have it rolled the same way, I would say that it rolled easier than I would have liked it to. So I found that L6 steel is in a really expensive sword, but doesn't seem to be doing what I would hope that steel would do. And I understand that it has a propensity to be a little tougher and a little softer. So sharpening is, you know, maybe expected because it's not necessarily supposed to be as hard. But rolling, when you bump into things, is not something that I think
definitely weird. I've not heard that one either. I know we talked about it prior. So he says about 10 years ago?
About 10 years ago.
So that was probably 2013. Factory Fire was in 2011. So they're probably in their first year doing production again. I was not with the company at that time. I'd left in 2006, came back in 2015. So there was a 9-year gap there. but that was right after the factory fire. So it may not have been a good one. I mean, it happens. I don't know what else to tell you. Just looking at the timeline of things, I definitely want to see it. I'd like to see what it looked like. Do you still have it?
No, I sold it. So, but what happened in the way back when is I made the review, and generally it was going swimmingly until then, right? Because I think the Oni is one of the coolest looking swords that Hanwei makes. It's black on black with some blacky black. It's ribbed for your pleasure. It's got demon faces on it. What more could a girl ask for other than maybe some more demon faces? But yeah, when it bumped, all of a sudden, kind of when the edge rolled, when I bumped my stand, I was like, oh, poopy. And so I did reach out and I said, hey, now I said, hey, I got this secondhand and I made a bad cut, right? So those are two things. One, you're not obligated to warranty it, and two, I wouldn't call it abuse, but I would say like, hey, I whacked the wooden stand, but I had video of the amount that I whacked the wooden stand, and I wasn't able to get anything done with it. So I think I asked Blake at the time if it could be cleaned up, what I could do about it, and there just wasn't much to be done. So I said, well, I don't want to look at it anymore. I can't fix it. And sharpening swords, katanas, particularly if you're not skilled at it, generally leaves them rather ugly looking. So I just sold it for a song and moved on to the next one. I did get an Oni later then, but again, it was followed up by the Kashra coming off. And so I whacked it. I went outside and I was like, all right, might be a dumb thing to do, but I'm gonna whack it on some wood. And it didn't roll. So it didn't have the same problem. But then the Kashra fell off. And I was like, I'm damned at either end. I can't see it. It's just not in the cards. I think it's a beautiful sword, but the Oni is just not for me, I guess.
The demon sword may not just be for you, buddy. I'll tell you that.
That seems
I mean, it's I hear all these things and it's just kind of odd. And I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying it's odd.
I agree.
I mean,
but then again,
whoever you're buying these things from, just stop. Just stop. I'll cut you a deal. Just buy it from us directly. We'll take care of you.
I would say that the whole situation is odd. I mean, I'm a dude, in his pajamas in his backyard whacking stuff with a sword on YouTube, and so like I don't know if it's odd that it happened or if it's odd I can say like, well, I can prove it to you. I was filming myself.
I mean, stuff happens. As our founder Barry Ross has told me many a times, the battlefields of the world are littered with broken swords, and obviously they're not indestructible. I mean, there's some things that it's going to break, and there are some things. Anytime there's a break, we want to see it. We want to see photos. And don't wait 2 years to tell us about it. If it's in 30 days, we can certainly get you. Hopefully, we can get your replacement if it's in stock. That kind of a thing. But a lot of these things. When I hear some stuff, I'm like, well, where did you get it from? A lot of times it's from people we don't know. Like, well, who's that? They're not a dealer we're aware of. So I mean, it's just one of those things where
are gray market products a problem? Because I'd assume that like I buy it secondhand, and I have some sense of how old it is. But do you find that forgeries or gray market things are common?
There for a while, someone was trying to, I think they were like buying Hanwei products off of Amazon and sending back cheap flea market stuff in their place. I mean, there's all kinds of that scam stuff going at any given time. But I mean, you look around, eBay, wherever you shop for your sword crack habit. I mean, you're going to see a lot of our, knockoffs of our product. The general series, a lot of the old Suba, like the old Suba series, you see a lot of katanas floating around with those. that were our original designs and things like that. But yeah, I mean, knockoffs they do exist. I mean, come on, guys, these things are made in China. I mean, how hard of a leap is it to figure out that somebody could be faking it over there just as easily?
That's a fair point. I would say I was reasonably confident because I have taken the tang off, and generally Hanwei puts a little bit more attention into the Nakago than I would say most people do. The Oni katana, for whatever reason, seem to be a little bit different, but I know they're made from a different kind of steel. They didn't always seem to have the same file markings and things like that on them. But I've had, I don't know, 6 or 7 Oni katana in totality now. Anyway, the point is that I'm reasonably sure that the swords that I had weren't like a knockoff with Oni fittings on them and were Hanwei. They were secondhand. You know, I get it. At the same time, my ability to get it serviced is a me problem. But if somebody else were to run into that problem and they did buy it from an authorized dealer and they said, hey, you know, I bought this sword 10 years ago. It's supposed to be a $1,500, you know, fancy sword that's supposed to be durable. And I finally built up the courage, right? I make enough money where now I feel like I can actually cut with my $1,500 sword and not be wincy about it. And the thing rolled or bent or like did this thing. Is that the kind of issue that Hanwei would stand behind, or are
10
those
years later is probably not going to be something we can help you with. We don't warranty them that far back. We give them a good solid year. I mean, most things you buy is 30 days. We give you a year.
That's fair. So cut with it within a year. Do a trial run. Make sure.
I mean, it's just our policy, you know. I mean, who gets? I mean, you know, maybe if our customers, you know, understand, you know, it's so hard, you know, it's so hard to get some of these things to market sometimes. If we were just stamping them out left and right and we had swords coming out our ears, yeah, I was into replacements. Everybody gets replacements. That would be great. I'd love that. So I'd love to get totally Oprah on it, but you know, we're lucky. We're lucky to get 20 Shintos a year. You know, we're lucky to get, you know, maybe a dozen Onis a year. You know, it's not like you know, Practicals 1070s. They can crank those out. You know, they've got that down. But you know, you're far more.
That's interesting. I didn't realize I've owned a year's worth of production of Onis in my lifetime now. That's that's weird. It's helpful to understand kind of the output from. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, and that may not necessarily. I mean, I know a little bit more about the Shinto than I do about maybe the Onis, but I mean, it's not like we get in a, you know. I'll give you a little bit of a nugget here. You know how many factory guys at Hanwei knows how to make the L6 katanas?
I'd probably guess you can count them on one hand.
Yep, that's true. I can count them on one finger too. Now, actually, I think they started a second guy this year.
You might want to just have a wooden stand nearby and have them give it a quick whack before it goes in the box. You know, just
telling you, you know. And back in the day, Ron Chin was the only one. I didn't know this till this past week. Ron Chin was the only one that made the paper crane. He was the only one that made those blades.
That kind of makes sense, though. He's gone on to you know, be a smith of notoriety, and I've had the pleasure of owning you know, one of his Lone Wolf katana. I had one of those for a minute, and so I got a chance to spend some time with one of his works, and I could see why, if you're gonna do some sort of bloomery steel, something with that much investment, that you'd want to have your top guy on it. So
yeah.
That's a sword I haven't heard about in a while. The paper crane. That's the only like Tamahagane, folded sword like that I recall Hanwei making.
It's become a topic of conversation in the last couple of weeks.
To do something like that again?
Yeah, but I mean, there's no decisions made. It's just like I said, it's just talk right now, and it may still be talk about this time next year, but we're talking about
it. When you approach a sword like that, because assumably the cost on it would be more now. I mean, the paper crane that's a sword from 20 years ago, and as I recall, it was the most expensive. I think is it the most expensive product Hanwei's made, or is it? It's up there anyway.
Again, that was a product that came after I left. I think so. I think you are correct. Again, and since we don't know, I don't know if there's anybody there that knows how to make it. It may be something we need to talk to Ron about, maybe making for us exclusively. And there's all kinds of possibilities there. But yeah, I mean, it was not an inexpensive one.
No, I recall it being like, I want to say like $3,500 or something like that. And I could be, right. I might have brain fog, but that means that 20 years later, after we're talking about inflation and all that, I mean, you're likely talking about a $5,000, $6,000 sword, presumably, to make something like that again. If you think about making something like that, is anyone going to buy them? Is that I imagine that's
always a question. It's always a question. I don't know. I mean, it's like I said, I mean, there's a lot of things we'd like to bring back. There's the problem is we can't make them, because a lot of these things have to be retooled, and that's very expensive. And fortunately, technology is changing and things like that, and maybe in the future it'll be a little less expensive to retool. But it's kind of one of those hard situations. You got to say, well, it was $3,500, but now it's going to be $7,000. I don't think anyone's going to buy that sword for $7,000.
Did anyone buy it? Was it a popular model, the paper crane?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Was it a popular model, the paper crane?
I believe so. Like I said, I wasn't there at the time, but it definitely seemed to be it was one of those. I would definitely call it a centerpiece of the line.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think there's in talking to people that seem to love the Kami katana, because there's been a few people that really like that sword, and it's not because of any one thing on the sword, but a lot of it has to do with when I was looking at swords, I would go to a martial arts store and they had a catalog for Hanwei, and in that catalog, that was the most expensive sword. And people fixate on the fastest car, the thing. It's the poster, right? And they're a little easier to afford than a Lamborghini. So, then somebody gets a job, makes some actual money, and they're like, God damn it, I'm gonna go get me that big red Lamborghini sword. And they want to have the Kami. But part of it isn't, the story that the fittings tell, or the red, or any particular thing about this very feature-rich sword, but it's because it was the highest end that they want it. And I think the paper crane, for some reason, just was in a different part of the catalog or something. Because I'm like, what about that one? They're like, what's that?
Yeah, the Kami, man, that one we've talked about bringing back as well. And we had a few that got brought back when we did the limited by CAS stuff. We had a few paper cranes. We had a few, I think those paper cranes were in Woots. And then we had we had a few Kamis. They went fast. I know, man, it's about what people want to buy. It's what do people want to buy? And, that's what we have to think about, because, if Paul Chen were sitting here and he would say, I just want to make stuff that makes people happy, which was a great philosophy to have. And, made Hanwei, very renowned. And now we're in the time that what are people looking at World War III want to buy? What do they think they need to have? Yeah, in case we have Red Dawn or something. So
it's a popular genre of sword.
Yeah.
You sent me an APOC sword, so I get a chance to play with it a little bit. It does seem like it plays into that theme pretty well. It seems well suited to the end of days minimal tooling sword.
I know we've probably blown our itinerary of questions all to crap.
there's no
but just for your listeners' sake, and this is true, there's not a week that doesn't go by that I don't get a phone call from someone saying, hey man, I need a sword. Oh, really? What do you need a sword for? Just in case. Just in case what? You're going to be attacked by ninjas? You're expecting an English cavalry charge across your front lawn? It's like,
that's what's on my 2024 bingo card.
There you go. That's what APOC. Just in case. There you go. Don't break the bank. Fully functional sword without all the bells and whistles. Just in case.
Speaking of our the laundry list of questions that I sent you to talk about, one of them was,
your screen froze. The suspense is killing me.
Drum roll. The question that I'd have is what did you expect maybe would sell really well and then didn't? Maybe a favorite piece or something that you thought should have done better than it did.
Oof. I don't know. Give me a minute to think on that, because there's been a few duds on the European side. The Creasy sword, that was one that we did with Kingston Arms that just didn't go anywhere. So that was one and done. I think we got like 300 of them and never got any more. And scratch number one on the one you got there in the background, I think. Or that's not the Creasy, I don't think.
Where I got the
on my right side, your left of the Claymore.
No,
I mean, basket hilt
there. I have a broadsword, a basket hilt broadsword. I have the sighted sword, and then I have the a Type 13 arming sword.
Yeah, Creasy's very similar to that. That one was a dud. Usually on the Japanese side of things, if something is a dud, it's because it's an outlier. Outlier products have a tendency to die pretty well. We've had a few DOAs come in over the years, but a lot of times it's timing. I was fortunate to be a part of the sword industry during what we call the golden age of swords, when Lord of the Rings lit up the world, and energized the whole sword industry. It was a good time. It's a time when men were men and women were men. And we're back in it again, I guess. I don't know. But it was a good time all the way around. There's a lot of buying and selling of swords.
I do recall, and there were certainly fewer players in it. I kind of wonder now if the age didn't pass, and that you're in a time with more demand than you've ever had, but there's just a lot more players out there. In 2008, the amount of people that made katana on the reproduction side of things were few and far between, and the price of antiques was also pretty substantial. So you couldn't go buy a training blade for less than a reproduction, and the reproductions that were out there were generally both expensive and not super common, and absolutely the quality varied a lot. Some of the reproductions, like I can remember, like the original Chris Cutlery blade that was like looked like it was ground out on a wheel grinder out of a piece of rebar. Like it'd be really challenging to use that as a tool for training. And so here comes, Hanwei with these relatively inexpensive swords that are available and certainly a lot closer to what they're trying to reproduce than a lot of the other folks out there. But now, you can, a $300 or $400 sword is not inexpensive. There's pieces out there for $60 that are at least have all the pieces. They're not beautiful they're not masterworks, but they're a lot closer than the $500 sword ground out of a piece of rebar used to be. And $300 can get you a lot for the money that you didn't used to get. Now you can get folded pieces, and I'm not saying that you're going to walk away with any heirloom quality piece, but you can find a lot for your money in that price point. And there's vendors that seem to move hundreds or thousands of units a month, which in my mind is like, who is buying these? But like, I think the sword market is really big. It's just that there's a ton of options and a lot of them are really cheap.
Yeah, I mean, and you're welcome. I don't know what to say to that. I think, back in the day when I think it was just I think it was a great moment when Barry and Paul met back in the, the late 90s, and everything kind of came together. And it was, I was a young man then. And looking back on that time, it really did change the game. And, there's plenty of good sword makers out there. We're not the only ones, in town for sure. And the internet really changed everything as far as cutting out the middleman, for some of these folks to, bypass the whole, distribution and, that, two-step process. Excuse me.
You're pretty solid with your mute button, Patrick. Well done.
Thank you. I came prepared. I apologize. I'm still trying to get over from being sick, but no, it's I think it just boils down to Barry. Barry's a lover of swords. And Paul, was a lover of swords, and it's their passion, created something that has a legacy, and hopefully we'll keep that legacy going well into the future. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Not at all, but you gave me something.
So what was the question again?
It was more about what I believe it was what didn't sell that you thought would. But I think maybe the reverse of that, if that may be more fun, is what did you think might be a stinker? I imagine you don't bring products to market that you're assuming that's going to be the case. But what did you think? Like, I don't know if that's going to take, and then it did really well.
Well, the latest one that was a pleasant surprise was the Modern Katana by Dragon King. I was kind of iffy about that one. Because I'm like, does the market really need another one of these? Apparently it did. The first 100 are almost gone. So, it was.
Okay.
And, one of the questions you had, who are these people buying? God only knows. God only knows. Thank God bless them too. I don't know who you are, but we love you and we appreciate you.
So the I'm trying to find it on your website here. The new modern katana. Here we go.
Hey, I want to mute for a second. I'm going to see if I can get my wife to make me some more tea before I completely lose my voice. unless you got any other questions you want to ask, do you want to see if anybody's got anything in the channel?
It's a good time. It's a good time to check in on chat. And
all right, I'm going to mute and stop the cam, and I'll be right back.
Well, yep, sounds good. All right, so Joe, who incidentally is in the chat here, I believe did a review on the modern katana by Dragon King. And one thing that stood out to me, apart from having a habaki, was that these minuki that got set in were, different than I've seen on some other interpretations of the tactical katana, and that it's Hirazukuri as well. But this is the one that Patrick said was doing good. So, chat, I said in the beginning that I'm going to suck at chat, and I have fulfilled that promise. So I can at least attempt to answer some questions. If you have them, please throw them in. Otherwise, I will go back and see if I can figure things out. Randall, new member, thanks for joining. Ooh, going way back. Lots of people in here. Da, 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 da. Lots of chat. In defense of Matthew's complaints regarding tightness in 2023, you're completely out of luck and need to rewrap. Your options are DIY or lacquer. That seems to be the case for me. Hopefully, if you do spot anything loose and you're willing to, you catch it in time where you can tighten it up, then lacquer seems to be a stopgap. If you're gonna rewrap it anyway, then you're not, I think, losing a lot by attempting the lacquer. Joe is here as well. Joe, as I was noting, did the video on the modern katana, so you should check out his channel. Joe also introduced me to Patrick, so I'm very grateful, Joe. We're sitting here having some fun. Was Dragon King formed by former Hanwei employees? Patrick mentioned somebody named Frenchie who did a lot of training and was a key figure at Hanwei, or at least instrumental in training a lot of staff. Started his own company, and I guess they're based in the same city but are separate companies. So yes, former Hanwei employees, and that may account for some of the striking similarities between them. In fairness, like the shaping, like they're not similar in the sense of the steels look exactly the same. They're a little bit different looking, but shaping, grinding, polishing, the fact that there are kind of unique fittings that are well cast and set in a model line, the way the businesses operate and the way they kind of manufacture swords, and the things you might like about a Hanwei are likely going to be the things that you will like about a Dragon King from the kind of fit and finish standpoint, in my opinion. What Patrick also noted, though, is that the Dragon King tends to give you a little bit more for your money, and his example was around some of the lesser expensive katanas, and that the practical line includes more synthetic materials, and the Dragon King pieces include more non-synthetic pieces like real semigawa and such. Hopefully that addresses it if it wasn't called out earlier, or if you didn't catch that part of the conversation. Full semigawa here. Cloudhammer will do a full wrap. We have a bunch of customers, including myself, that often go that route. So some do offer. Scott, yep, I agree. The full semigawa wrap, in the event that you can get it, I think it adds a bit of structural integrity to a handle if possible. So if you think about it, you have the wooden core, which is effectively the tang, and then two bits of wood that are formed around that tang with two pegs on there. But glue and those pegs are all that's holding it together, which sometimes can be enough, but there's a lot of force that gets exerted on a sword. And if you wrap that in cotton or silk or something like that, well, it's also holding it together. And then if you put those two little caps, the kashra, the fuchi and the kashra on the sword, again, you're doing something to kind of structurally reinforce it. But samegawa is like incredibly tough stuff. And so they wet it, they wrap it around the handle, bind it really tight, and it kind of form fits around the handle. And it's not samegawa like really soft, supple, like jacket leather that you may have encountered in textiles and clothes and stuff like that. It's like a rawhide. So it really adds a bit of structure to the handle and makes it quite a bit stronger if you're whacking stuff or doing silly things like I am with it. Or even if you're not, you just want it to be robust, then there you go. It's not ahistoric to not have full wraps of samegawa. They did both historically. But I think when I say they did both historically, so same was an expensive substance, and if you wanted to look wealthy without showing it, because doing a full wrap took more of the material, so I think that was why it was done, not necessarily because it was better to do it. Either was done, but I think one like is more for show than for function. I think for function you would want that done, and probably they did want it done historically, but that's me talking out of my ass a little bit. Catching up. I'm so far behind on chat. I am sorry.
I did see one question I do want to answer. And yes, that is partially my Star Wars collection back there. And it's some more of it over there. So now you know why I don't own swords.
You've got other loves to occupy your wallet.
So yes, that is. So I got episode 1, episode 2. I didn't buy any episode 3. I was pretty upset with episode 3. And I still got like 4 or 5 more totes I've still got to unpack. And then they're going to go on that wall over there.
What from the Star Wars, I can't make out what those are. Are they figures or?
Yeah, they're all action figures.
Do you collect any, like, are you after movie props or the lightsabers or any other thing in particular?
No, I have a few. Back in the mid 2000s, CAS was working with a company who did Star Wars props. I was really hoping that would have taken off, but it just didn't happen. But we did a couple of things, a couple of helmets, masks, and things like that. It just never really panned out. Movie prop industry stuff is kind of hit or miss. You're talking about gamble of bringing something to market. That's an industry you can certainly lose your shirt in.
Do you recall if Hanway made replicas of the pieces in the movie Stardust?
Not that I'm aware of.
There was a Kyber or a Messer style thing from the main protagonist in the movie, and I could have sworn that it was a Hanway piece that it looked like. I don't think it was sold by Han, but I guess I don't know. Now I'm going to see if I can bring up a photo of it.
Well, I worked on a lot of the movie stuff over the years. There's a guy I work with named Tony Swanton in Burbank, and we supplied him a lot of the swords and parts of swords for like Pirates of the Caribbean. If you remember the first Pirates movie where Orlando Bloom hands the sword to the governor, he's talking about being a folded steel blade. That was a reproduction of George Washington's ceremonial sword that we made. So, let's see. The Musashi katana was in the second Metrics movie. It's now we call it the Practical Pro. It's basically a Musashi blade and handle with the wheel of Dharma, Suba. I've had a ton of products in Underworld 2. I got to read this. That was cool. I got to read the script of that movie before it came out. So, but yeah, our products are in probably about every TV show and movie that there is. Grimm, the TV series, I think it was on NBC. That guy used our Heroes Axe XH1074, and they started doing like some stuff with it. I was like, I have to issue a cease and desist or something there, because they're trying to make money off our product. So, but it never went anywhere, because I think I only had like 3 or 4 seasons, but it was good.
I'm gonna play lawyer as well. Well, here's a question: what is your favorite shinken to practice with, and why? So, if you don't practice with swords, then maybe what's your favorite katana?
Not anymore. I do cut, and we do product testing. If you go to the Yanone video, you'll see Blake and I hacking away on some mats with the Yanone. That's about all I do anymore. But if I had to pick one, it would be the Seawave for sure. It's definitely my favorite.
Well, that one is will be featured on my channel thanks to your review sample. I'll get to it in the not too distant future. I've been practicing with it a little bit, and it's I'll admit that one has surprised me. Yeah, I did not expect to like it as much as I do. And I initially, so I've had Dragon King things, and it's not that I've thought poorly of them. I mean, for what the price is, the fact that they offer some like different kind of shapes, they've come sharp. I think there are some things to be appreciated about the base level products, which I've had. But this is the first sword of any kind of higher end that I've had from Dragon King in my hand. And there's little things that I really think they did pretty well. I really like the grip is big, and you've probably heard the axe handle thing from Hanwei. But I would say that this is like a refined version of it. It's big, but it fits my hands well. It doesn't feel too big. It doesn't look misshapen. It doesn't look sized for American hands. It fits well. It indexes well. And so as a training tool, I've enjoyed it. The blade also has like it's loud, so it's fun to train with. It makes a good swishy sound, but it moves with a little authority. Like you think it's going to be a dainty thing, but it's reasonably robust. And then the saya feels wet, almost like the polish, the sheen, whatever material that you use with the scabbard is slippery. Like, but not like in a bad way where it falls out of my hand like a banana peel or something. But like it's just a really high polish. So if I'm moving it around in my belt or anything like that, it just kind of glides around, and it has a feeling on it that's rather pleasant, and it's pretty sword. So I'll do a review on it eventually. But my initial impressions were just I wasn't expecting to like it so much.
You froze. The suspension is killing me.
Well, I'm not going to repeat myself, sir. I said a bunch of nice things about that Dragon King sword, but now you'll have to wait for the review.
Such is my life.
Well,
so what did our buddy Joe have to say? I saw it when I was walking towards the kitchen. I heard you say Joe.
Joe is, or was anyway, in the chat.
There he is.
I was impressed with the modern. Yes, I mentioned he did a review on the the modern katana that you mentioned that did well, and so I referred folks to his video. Were there any other, I mean, for example, one that comes to mind, I mentioned to you in the email that I rather liked it, and it is the Kui or Chi Jian. It's the kind of drop forge single billet Jian. And as I recall, they were pretty expensive pieces. And I remember seeing the video about them, and I thought that was so stupid. It just didn't interest me in the slightest. And then I got one kind of, again, secondhand, and I was like, this is so nice.
Things you didn't think would sell.
Yeah. Is that one that you thought would sell or wouldn't sell? Did it do well while it was out? Because that's one from Hanwei that
Yeah, it was one of those. The Chinese products are, I hate to say it, are hit or miss. I mean, it's kind of, you roll the bones a lot of times on, because, you know, the Scott Riddell stuff is probably some of, you know, great selling, great made products. The SH2008 is really good, you know, good product, consistent seller. I mean, it's that old, you know, it's 2008. You know, it's one of the last GT, what we call GT swords, before we switched our numbering system. So, but so we got any good questions before I completely lose my voice?
Sorry,
I'm trying to keep it, people, I promise. It's good to see you there, Joe.
I'm glad Joe came in. I think people have been talking about Tsukamaki and whatnot. I'm having trouble picking out specific questions for you in the chat.
Yes, I would love to do a Star Wars katana, but I don't think Lucasfilm will talk to me right now.
Which Dragon King do you have to review? I have the Sea Wave and the Tiger katana from Hanwei and the katana from APOC as well to do my silly things with.
I'm waiting on some stuff to come in so I can send some stuff to Joe. He's probably thinking I've forsaken him. I haven't.
Don't forsake Joe. If you have questions for Patrick, throw them in. I'll try to be more vigilant on the
regular channel or Instagram. I do, actually. I have Pat the Sword Guy on Instagram.
Pat the Sword Guy on Instagram. If you send it to me, I'll be sure and put it in the link.
I don't know if I want everybody to know it. So, you know, just, you know, it's just if I do stuff on television or anything like that, that's just where I put it. Or if I'm at a show, I'm at a blade show or something like that, that's where I'll put it.
You mentioned that you want to make what people sell. Was the like, hey, what's the best sword for the zombie apocalypse? Is that the inspiration for the APOC katana? And if it was, what's the next line based on silly questions you get at shows?
Excuse me. Yes, the answer is yes. APOC.
So you get asked, hey, what's the best sword for a zombie apocalypse? And you're like, we're going to make one so that I can just hand it to you.
Yeah, I was like, you know, well, first, you know, it's like money's tight. And, you know, if you want to survive on a dime, you know, APOC's the way to go. You know, it's, it's a joke. You know, we put that whole survival, you know, spiel on it. But I mean, they're really practical tools. And, you know, and that's one of those, it's going to be one of those lines where, you know, refinements are going to be done gradually over time. Because when you order APOC, we just don't get like 50 or 100. You know, we get like 200 or 300, or we get 400 or 500. So that's going to be one where it's like, we needed to fix this. It's going to be 2 years before you see any type of revision in that line, unless they all just like go very quickly and everybody sends us all their feedback all at once and we can turn it around to the factory. But we get quite a few of those, you know, every time we get them. So, but it's a fun line. It's probably the funnest line I've worked on in years, just trying to just get it to market.
Thoughts on
working with Frenchie again on Dragon King stuff has been fun. Thoughts on spalted maple handles. Man, I'd love to be able to do some stuff with spalted maple handles. I don't know how they work on a sword. But no, it's, what was the question? Like Chicken Little.
Squirrel. No, it's you answered it already, and that was APOC a response to, you know, the questions for what is the best survival katana zombie apocalypse thing. But it sounds like that's a response to you're seeing a need or a desire for a product from customers.
Sure.
So I'm curious then what's next on the list of products that you see people are asking for or wanting today.
Well, if people think that we don't respond to feedback, hopefully this will shed some light on that. Well, one thing we have gotten a lot of requests for, and I'll keep bringing up Dragon King, but it's kind of where things are happening right now. People have been asking for a differentially tempered blade in the seasonal katana series, because those katana are 3 tempered. But so we're talking to Dragon King right now about bringing out the spring and the autumn versions with a differentially tempered blade for next year. Been a lot of calls for that, so we're looking into it. It might be this time next year before we get them, but they're in a better position to respond to the market than Hanway is, where Hanway's still playing catch up from the pandemic. You were talking. Now, one thing I was going to say, you were talking about people, having buying that Corvette, buying that model. I will say, let me fix my camera here. I will say, when the pandemic hit, we were just kind of thinking, oh man, this is going to be bad. This is going to be 2008 all over again for the sword industry. It was the best year we ever had. Everybody bought. I mean, the folded steel was the first thing to go. It was like everybody had all this extra money sitting at home buying stuff. We didn't have a piece of folded, because we got stocked right after the first of the year. We're like, oh, this is bad. It's going to be bad. I think we were the only sword company at the time that had product. It was like one of our best years ever. It was great.
I would bet a lot of people had the same reaction, and so if you just by happenstance kind of freshened up inventory, a lot of people. I guess I can't speak for the sword industry, but I can speak for industries outside the sword industry. Were kind of halting production, paying fines for foregoing, kind of paying the penalty to stop production.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, nope, actually we need all that stuff plus maybe double, triple. Can you triple it? And by then it just didn't catch up. It was too late. And so, yeah, a lot, that's a fortuitous arrival of a shipment right there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And now I'd imagine that things are simmering down a little bit. I kind
of
definitely
leveling out.
Yeah, that the base level stuff is probably moving a little bit more than the highest end stuff you have.
Well, I mean, you got to understand, for almost 3 years, maybe 2, we were less than 50%, warehouse stocked for a long time. And I think I'm remembering, if I'm remembering that number correct, but it was tough. We started out great, and then things started trickling in after, the mass exodus, and we've been fine in that regards. And we're looking at, CAS is the biggest little company you'll ever deal with. So, it's just us, and we just keep plugging along.
That's I think the other thing people ask for, or at least there's the zombie apocalypse weapon, and I think you've got an answer to that. The other one is a super durable sword. One of the questions I certainly get as a review person is like, what's the best sword? And then when I say like, well, what do you want out of a sword? The answer is, I don't want it to break. I want the most durable thing out there.
Good luck.
Is that a customer you're trying to serve, or are you trying to shy away from people that want to whack trees with a sword?
Now, if you're buying our product to kill a tree, just send it back to me. I'll refund you your money, and I will sell you an axe. And just being honest. If you think you can go out down and chop down a tree with a sword, I'll be glad to refund your money and spare the sword the indignity.
Chop down a tree with one of your swords. I've done it. I mean, I'm not arguing it's a good idea, but I'm saying that the Raptors, they hold up, and I'm pretty sure I took down one with a practical. But then again, I think that's like a rite of passage with a practical almost.
Well, the 5160 steel is pretty tough, and it's more forgiving than I say 9260 is pretty forgiving. I think it's why we put it on APOC.
You mentioned before that there's other folks out there that make good swords. Are there maybe special artisans, smiths, designers, or something like that you would like to work with and see a kind of a collaboration with?
Sure. We got some collaborations going on right now I can't talk about yet. So maybe in about 8 months, maybe around Blade Show we can talk.
Okay.
Right now.
Yes, and we are.
Acting.
Okay. All right. No spoilers. Not trying to get anyone in trouble.
I'll be honest with you though. I usually don't get to see other people's product, other competitors' product, until it gets shipped to us by mistake, because everybody thinks it's ours. And then that's about the only time I really get to look at it. And I try to stay knowledgeable. And when you're at Blade Show wearing the CAS shirt and you're walking around their booth and they're like, I'm like, dude, I'm just looking. I'm just here to admire and browse. It's like he's checking us out. No, I'm bored and we only got 45 minutes left in the show and I'm trying to find something interesting to occupy my time. So, it's supposed to be funny, but it is true.
I suppose people might get nervous, like I don't necessarily play as much in the knife space, but it seems like it's kind of tough to think of an original thought there on a knife. And when folks have something that a little niche or a little touch that makes something.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's
a calling card. They're nervous about people.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, we'd never scoop another person's idea. I mean, that's not us, but but we're probably one of the few that wouldn't, I know that's the thing.
That's unfortunate. Are there products that like it's not in the cards to make, but like you wish you could make? It sounds like lightsabers were one, but is there like another?
Someone had mentioned in the chat about doing some Sith, Manuki, and I mean, I'd love to do some Star Wars themed swords, but I don't know if that'll ever happen. And I'd be lying to say if I didn't have some designs already drawn up. But for the most part, there's lots of things still left to
What
be
about
done.
a My Little Pony katana? Just asking for a friend.
We're talking Rainbow Dash here.
We're talking Rainbow Dash, Patrick. That's
Okay.
what.
I have 3 daughters, so I'm fully aware.
Yep,
Our friendship.
So it's kind of I'm not any further on it for those of you wondering, but I've done a number of random projects and custom swords, and some of the folks that I work with, one in particular has often cautioned me by saying, Matt, if you do that, it's going to be a My Little Pony katana, and it has always been the sword which we dare not make, right? Mm-hmm. It's always been like the don't go that far, and at one point I was like, I kind of want to just make a straight up My Little Pony katana, and so I made a Friendship is Magic Rainbow Dash katana. I laid it all out, and unfortunately, getting the Suba made has been problematic to not pay $2,000 to have it made. So I'm probably going to have to rethink my plans. But yes, I outed myself a little bit. But yeah, I'm going to make a My Little Pony katana, Patrick, and then you will make that face that you are making right now when you see it.
Well, I'll tell you a story that you'll probably find funny. You're talking about things, and I just thought of this. Talking about products you didn't think that would sell. Black katanas. Black katanas. It's like, man, does the world need another black katana? And we're talking about a product that I was not impressed with when I got it out of the box. The Yanone from Dragon King. I'm like, ugh, another black katana. I don't know what they did with the blade on the Yanone, but man, I don't care for the handle. I don't care for the furniture, but the blade on the Yanone is probably one of the best cutting katana blades that I've ever gripped in a long, long time. Under $500. Yeah, that one. And I was so not thrilled about this. I'm like, yeah, what the market needs is another $500 black katana. So a rainbow dash katana would do nothing more but thrill me than have to see another black katana.
just sick of looking at the same
the
same katana over and over and over again. I kind of feel you too. I've certainly made my fair share of swords like that, and you do kind of get sick of looking at the same one over and over and over again. But Dragon King, as well as Hanwei, seem to put in a fair amount of variation, and there's some really kind of blingy designs in there. You know, there's
got to have a showpiece in every line.
A lot of manufacturers now offer some variety of customization. It sounds like the Dragon King and Hanwei business model is, making hundreds of a particular sword at a time. Has there ever been any thought to doing kind of one-off customization type things?
Sure. We've talked about it. Certainly. The problem is that's not really our business model. If anything new and interesting that they throw at us, that's, it's like, oh, we did a run of these and it didn't quite turn out the way we wanted it, but they're good, just not what we were aiming for. We'll take a look at it, for sure. But it's just hard for us to do one-offs, to tool up for one sword just to not make any more. It's not really our cup of tea. Now, there could be some opportunities next year for us to do some one-off stuff with maybe some of our collaborations we're working on.
Well, I can imagine from a logistics brain standpoint that if you're operating in batches of hundreds, to think of like managing an individual customer order and getting all the little parts right and like having to worry about that one, that's a lot more than meets the eye. At the same time, you have this very unique set of fittings and designs, right? That people try to knock off, but some of the colors used, some of the various ways the sayas are built, some of the forms and whatnot that are used in the fittings, and it'd be really interesting to see, if you could mix and match the parts and just say, hey, I really like the blade of the orchid, but I really like the fittings on the oni. I want an orchid blade, but I want oni Fuchikashiro. I want the oni. I want it to look like an oni, but I want, and I want purple. I want, something that allowed you to kind of play a little bit with the variety of parts that are available. In theory, I mean, you'd probably have to set up a different website or something like that to do it and help you with the orders there. But there may be opportunity there, because at the moment, if you like the fittings on the oni, but you don't want a big girthy sword, you have to spend $1,500 on a sword and then spend probably $1,500 having somebody, chop it down to size a little bit.
I think CAS looked at that many years ago, and that's definitely not in the cards anytime in the next 5 years. It's just not our niche. It's it would. I think there's definitely, if somebody wants to go into that part of the market and own it, you have our support. We'll make blades for you. Whatever you need us to do, we'll be glad to supply you. I mean, it's just retail's not our game. We're a wholesale company. We do sell retail if you're in Bumble, wherever, and there's nobody's willing to, or whatever situation it is, but it's just not our bag. Were there any good questions in the chat? I don't want to forget our chat people.
You are a kinder man than me. Let's see, what do we have?
Seeing some things like, oh, I want to respond to that.
Well, go ahead. You see one?
I have to scroll back up.
What would the super be on? Oh, we got My Little Pony katana questions.
Okay, I'm good with that.
As a man with 3 daughters,
Mm-hmm.
father of 3 daughters, which My Little Pony would you go for?
Probably Twilight Sparkle.
Twilight Sparkle. Yep.
Or what's the Nightmare
Moon.
Nightmare Moon. Thank you.
Yep, we're getting our brony on right here.
Yeah.
Would the super be
my friends see this?
My initial idea for the Rainbow Dash Katana, which was my daughter's favorite character as a kid, is she does this this move where she goes fast and it makes like a cloud that kind of looks like a Suba behind her, like this big sonic boomy thing. And so I thought it'd be cool if I had a rainbow, cloud looking, in the blue colors of that pony, and then had the Suba be like one of those explosion things, and then try to find like a horse head Kashra or something like that, so it looked like the pony, because she got this little like hooves back and the pony face, and trying to find a Kashra that did that. But to get it made is thousands of dollars, and to get somebody to design it and like draw it out is like, nobody wants to do that for free either, which I can appreciate. So I have to go back to the drawing board, and I think the Suba will probably end up being a Twilight Sparkle cutie mark, because there's fewer colors and it's a simpler design. And in fairness, if I do it that way and you didn't know that it was a My Little Pony sword, so look out. One of these days I'm going to put out a video and be like, look at this sword, and then it'll be a My Little Pony sword, and you'll look silly. You'll have to hand your man card in or something like that if you don't know.
I'm sorry, no, I'm not handing my man card in for that. It's my job. I'm supposed to supply the world with things that they need.
That's right. Well, you gotta make the Dragon King Friendship is Magic line, and it's just like the spring, autumn, just like the season series. You will have to make the My Little Pony series, and I think you could do it. And honestly, Patrick, this is something I've talked about before, and I don't want to bore everyone with. I can see viewers leaving now as I continue to talk about this the sword project. But
this is about us.
When I first said I'm going to do this My Little Pony katana thing, it was kind of like ha ha ha. But I was like, but I want to do it well, and I'll make a fun project about it. Out of all the times I've done 20, 30, 50, I don't know how many custom sword projects. Every now and again, I'll have somebody that wants to like chip in an idea or contribute or say something or inform me about where my kind of thoughts and musings are misguided. Never before did I have anyone or as many people be so generous and like kind with their time. There were a ton of people that reached out and were like, I love swords and I love My Little Pony, and here are some thoughts and ideas. And like, hey, like people were really trying to help me make the best My Little Pony katana possible. You may have an underrepresented market in that.
Well, more and more women are getting involved in, martial arts, not only just Japanese or Asian martial arts, but HEMA too. And that's one of the challenges that we do face, is you got to balance between, historically accurate versus, humans are this size today. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would you need that to be that long? They were only such and such length back in that time. Well, they were only about 5 feet tall too. 5'5", 6 foot tall was a rarity. I'm not just throwing random numbers out there, but I think you get my point. People weren't that big. They didn't eat that much. They were smaller. A lot of them were starving. Thank God for petroleum. That one's for the oil companies.
Pour one back for the oil companies. Outlander has a suggestion for you in a functional version of the Samurai 3000 from United Cutlery, which, in fairness, is I know you're not fond of stealing people's ideas or IP, but it does kind of look like a lightsaber with a steel blade sticking out of it. So, you know.
Oh, I could do one better. I think I could do a Sith. I could do a Sith katana, titanium coat, the blade red, and figure out how to get the hamon to come through.
You could combine your love of guitars and maybe not swords, but you could make an axe and make a functional battle axe tar.
Remind me off camera. I'll tell you a story about how that went terribly awry at a show a couple of years ago.
I'd imagine you'd have to sharpen the part that's near your giblets. So that sounds like.
Yeah, I'll tell you later.
Okay.
The axe guitar will not work.
I have it on good authority. It will not work.
It will not work.
Okay. All right. That's a story I do want to hear. But let's see. What other questions do we have? We gotta vote
said
for
something about Dragon King Iaito.
What's that?
Somebody said something about Dragon King Iaito. I would buy my daughter's Dragon King My Little Pony Iaitos. See, that is something I am working on, is trying to get an Iaito line for Dragon King, and something that our general manager Crystal and I have talked about. You find a Iaito blade from us, it's 27, 28, 29. I think we need to have a 26 because there are more women entering the market, and I want to make it easily accessible to them. So that was one of my stances.
I don't think that's a bad idea. There's plenty of folks that want them shorter, and there's also people that want them longer. I struggle finding 30, 31 inch blades for EI. It's not a common thing to be able to use, and so most of the swords that I test are around 27, 28. But if I want to, there's a technique called sayabiki where you're supposed to remove and kind of pull back the saya, and you have to, or the sword doesn't come out and allow you to do the technique. But because I'm tall, using a smaller sword, I can I can just skip it. I don't have to do it at all. But if I get an Iaito that's more proportional to my size, then I have to do it, and it makes for a more effective training tool. But yeah, sword Iaito that go up to 32 inches also kind of handy, because then you have to use your hips. If you don't, you don't get the sword out. You kind of look like a dingle fritz.
Well, I've done enough Iaito to know if you don't get that little hip drop, you're not going to get the tip out of there for sure. So, I don't know how many we would sell. We might sell a handful at most at 30 plus inches.
You think? That's one of the most common requests I seem to hear from folks is people buy the longest sword they can, but as soon as it's called an O-katana, that's not really what they wanted. But that's not quite what it is. But anyway, yeah.
I'd like some more information on that. I'd be very curious, because your prime is 28, 27, 28. And then, 29, if you're doing a 3-to-1 ratio, you're doing, 28, 27, 29. And anything beyond that is hit or miss.
Have you had any 30, 31 inch swords? I remember the Winter Sun that I had from Dragon King was 31 inches long.
I think that might have been it. I don't know. The problem is one of my jobs on, keeping up to this stuff is making sure our specs stay within specifications. So sometimes things get longer and we don't know why, and we have to say, hey, shrink it back down. Or they get a little heavier and say, hey, making it heavier doesn't make it better.
That's an interesting point you brought up. I mentioned it, I think, in the email that the bamboo mat that I have.
Yeah.
Which, if you're looking for a collaboration, you're certainly
You like that
welcome
sword,
to
by the
copy
way?
my bamboo mat. That's what's that?
You like that sword?
I do. I do. I'm a fan. I'm a fan. But in fairness, I'm a fan of the bamboo mat that I have. And so the story goes, I bought it. I got it many, many years ago. I think it's more than a decade ago now. So I'm guessing it was one of the earlier bamboo mats, because I know that's not the oldest line of swords out there. And I liked it so much that I was like, well, with all the stupid things I get up to, inevitably I'm going to break the sword or do something with it where it won't be worth repairing, and it'd be great to just have another one. And I'm through a baker's dozen of these things, and I have yet to find one that feels the same. And I've found out after I started measuring them that mine is roughly 8 ounces heavier. If I measure the bare blade of 3 other bamboo mats, they're a lot closer in proportion, but they're close to like 8 ounces lighter in bare blade than that. So a half a pound in a bare blade of a katana, 28-inch katana, is quite a lot of weight.
Yeah, it's something I am aware of. Things have gotten, and I'd be curious. Again, I got to look at the timetable. When is your favorite? Was it made pre-factory fire, or was it made post-factory fire?
Pre.
Yeah, that's the reason why.
Yeah,
I would say so.
Things were
hold on to it. Hold on to it. Don't let it go. Don't sell it. I may ask for some specifications off of it.
So I've bedazzled my bamboo mat. It looks a little different now, and it has
just need a measurement.
Has swirlies all over it, so that, of course, those would have to follow. It would not be a copy of mine if it wasn't. You can put more of them on there, but you can't put less of them. The count can only go up.
Just interested in the blade, man. Not gonna hurt your feelings or nothing.
I like that. All right, you fucking nutter. Just take out a tape measure and so pre-fire though, the blades were a little bit on the stouter side. Is that was a common thing, or?
Well, like I said, I was not there. It's just something I've noticed. I do have, probably shouldn't tell people this, but we do have a lot of the original prototypes still in the building. Some have disappeared over the years, but we do have a lot of the original prototypes, and we use that as a basis to kind of look. And I reference the old catalogs a lot of times, looking at stuff and looking on our website now going, good grief, that thing's grown by half an inch and a pound. They're really getting their value for the money if you believe in weight and length. Just some of that stuff we just got to address. And like I said, we got well over 1,400 products, something like that. It's, you talk about one, it's like, which one do we start with? We usually just kind of start with the best sellers and start working back. And, it's, the bamboo mat's a great sword. I kind of remember back in the day when Conway came out with a HWS steel. I'm very proud of their, it's like, oh, it's a secret. Okay, well, I won't ask any questions, but
in fairness, it has held up pretty well. I've done some very silly things with that sword, as one might expect. Now, I didn't go whack it into a metal pole or anything, but for it being a sword I really enjoy so much, you wouldn't have expected me to like maybe have too many beers and forget it outside in the rain. Like you wouldn't think that would be the case, but it definitely has been the case. And it didn't rust. It didn't get all like nasty. I've whacked many tatami mats and branches. It's in probably need of a honing now, but it really held the edge quite well for a very long time. And it also was pretty for a differentially hardened blade and cutting some, like oak dowels and stuff. It was pretty loath to bend. I'm not going to say it's the most durable sword I've ever tested. I haven't like intentionally broken it, but I have neglected it and done some harder cutting with it, and it's really stood up quite well to it.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, bad for the sword that you left it out in the rain. Glad it didn't.
Yeah.
Didn't rust.
I was like, what's that outside? God damn it. Did it, and then I went out and I was like, but it's not rusting. It was sunny and like humid the next day, and it wasn't full of rust, which other things may have been next to it. So
Might have been, it had that famous aqueous or whatever they called it, the coating on it. They had before that machine went up in the fire. They had a coating on, I forget what it was called, some plasma coating or something they were doing on all the blades.
I guess it didn't look like anything in particular coating wise, but
it was clear.
I mean, I do generally keep them in CLP, and sometimes that holds up, but it doesn't usually when it's like laying in the grass.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been impressed with how well the steel has held up.
Outlander Systems, I'm going to answer your question. Yes, we are planning to expand the Dragon King Modern line. That the answer is yes. I can't tell you what, but yes, we are planning to add a couple of more SKUs.
Is it going to be a Wakizashi and a Tanto?
Well, it's already got a Tanto, but it is getting its matching Wakizashi for sure. That's old news.
Bird says he's 6'2" and likes 27.5 inches. And so I can only tell Bird that he's wrong, that you don't prefer that. Your personal preferences are incorrect, sir.
Long-handled walk. Am I talking James Williams? Is that you, James?
James, I know he is the fan of long handles.
I know James. I've known James for years. I joke with James all the time. I'm not poking fun at him. I not said anything I didn't say to his face and then run away.
Do you find the long handles are popular? Do you have some models?
I'll be honest with you. As far as katanas go, I prefer them. I'm kind of barrel chested, and anytime I was doing cutting, I always prefer a longer handle. 11 inches is a little too small for me. 12, it's kind of more my speed.
Okay.
But I short blade, long handle. That's kind of my thing. But I'm an anomalous. Kind of.
Is there any perk to having the models in different sizes? I know I've had them come in different sizes over time, but I don't know if they're like advertised as different lengths.
I don't know how to answer that. Is it any advantage?
Well, I mean, would you sell them? So, I mean, if you sold the, the bamboo mat, but you sold a 29, a 28, and a 27-inch version of it.
I mean, that's definitely doable. I mean, that's not like the fittings or anything like that we have to do tooling on is going to change. Or, I mean, it's just a matter of saying, hey, we're going to order 50 of this one, 50 of that one, and 50 of the other. It would be our general manager would be sitting there sweating bullets, worried about those 29-inch ones, how quickly they would sell. 27 and 28s would not be a worry. It's just it'd be a chunk of money to invest in some longer ones. But
if you do the 29-inch ones, I might suggest you skip the 29-inch and jump right into the 30, 31-inch range. The reason I say that is some people obviously prefer the shorter ones, and you have your sweet spot for what's selling. At the same time, I know a lot of people, one of the common questions I get asked is, where can I get a 31-inch katana? Who makes a good one? And a lot of the blades that are out there that are in that length are overweight. They're pretty chunky, and they're not really well portioned or balanced. And a lot of times they're pretty, they don't have some of the flair that some of the models that you have out there do.
So I do want an APOC and it sells. We'll look at maybe doing one for Dragon King. Yeah,
it'd be interesting to see what sells. I think I'd start with like a practical XL though, like one of those baselines, and then make a 31-inch, because the people that I hear asking for it are people that practice, and I don't know if the APOC line would draw the same attention or if there'd be the same desire to have it. But like if I look for a 31-inch blade, it's because I want a training tool. but I want to cut with it and I want to like do EI with it and I want to practice with it. But I need a sword that like I'm going to cut with and train with. And they're tough to find. But I don't know anyone who wants a 29-inch. Like specifically, they always want, like, they settle for a 29-inch when they're looking for a 30 or 31-inch. But nobody's like, very few people are like 29 is the perfect spot for me. So you might just not have gone far enough. It's
definitely food for thought. Like I said, I'm open to get any type of suggestions for that type of stuff. I will say right now though, katana sales are kind of soft. It has been this year's, people are obviously still buying them, but over the last few years, it's kind of softened a little bit. Europeans kind of on the upswing, no pun intended, right now. So we got a lot of attention focused on that.
When are you coming out with the Type 18C? When is?
I'll say again, I'm sorry.
The Type 18C is like the big, broad cutting blade, and they tend to. I don't do HEMA myself, but it does seem like they are a favorite among people that like to cut things in the HEMA community. And they're a big long sword like the Albion Alexandria, but Albion makes one. Dark Sword Armory makes one. I think Arms and Armor makes one. There's a number of folks that make them, but Hanwei has the Practical XL. In terms of making dedicated lawnmowers, you guys make a very solid, value-oriented blade. Which, incidentally, another question I get asked all the time: what sword is really good for, like, I want to cut tatami mats and learn how to do it? It's like, well, that tough to find a better katana that's going to do more of the work for you than that one on a budget. Anyway, those are excellent lawnmowers if that's what you're looking for. So the Type 18C is like the European, geometry for dedicated lawn mowing.
Yeah, send me some information on that. I'd like to take a look at it.
Can do.
I mean, it's, like I said, I'm not up to date on it right now, but I'd like to take a look at it.
I can certainly do it. I can certainly send you something that outlines some of the popular ones. I have two people in my dojo shopping for a Shinken, and one wants a 30 and the other wants a 31 32-inch. It's Hunter. 28, 29, then 31. It sounds like if you go over 28 inches, though, you get a little nervous if your inventory is gonna have a low turn. So,
well, it's just historical sales. Usually, and like I said, it's it's kind of ratioed. Just kind of, we know how it's going to hit. But we're not afraid to take a chance. I mean, it's something we can discuss. Like I said, I need to see some data. See some market, something out there in the market that says that there's a demand for this. This is, we don't know everything, guys. I mean, it's like I'm sitting here going, in my infinite knowledge, 20 years of experience, I can tell you that we'll never sell.
I think you've sold more swords than most of the people here, if not probably everyone. I mean, there's a fair amount of knowledge that comes with what's going to sell. There's a lot of method behind the madness when you do it for a long time, and it's like, that's a cool thing for you, but Matt, nobody else is going to buy My Little Pony katana. You're a crazy person. Like, that's a fair.
I mean, I know.
It's a fair thing to say. I do get asked enough though, and so I don't know if I could compile a meaningful amount of data other than to say that it's a frequent enough question. But I'd imagine there's probably other people that retail your products that would get more questions. Or you could do one of those Instagram polls or something like that.
That's reliable data.
Do a pre-order and say, are you willing to put $100 down on a pre-order? They'll come in 6 months. We're doing an order for 31-inch bamboo mats, and just see who's willing to put their money where their mouth is.
Maybe one of our, if one of our retailers wanted to go that way, we would definitely get behind it. Like again, we're not in the retail game; we're in the wholesale game.
That's fair.
It's an interesting thought. It's an interesting thought for sure.
What I can tell you is, just because you might be aware, I I spend a fair bit of time in the weeds on these things, is there are not a lot of companies that make it. And that certainly is probably indicative of exactly what you're describing, and that the sweet spot for sales is 27, 28 inch. If that's what moves the most, that's where people focus. But a lot of the competition that you're dealing with out of Longshuan seems to, well, every now and again, they'll make a long blade. They can do custom stuff every now and again, but the vast majority are 27 or 28 inches long. And in order to do something custom, it kind of fits the same profile. They don't have wider habaki, so you don't get the slightly bigger one that you guys put on some of your other swords. They don't kind of come out as smooth. And a lot of the folks that make okatana make them egregiously heavy to the point that they're not particularly fun to train with. So if you want to use them like a katana, you're getting some wrist exercise. So it's tough to find something that's well made, like a longer version of a Shinto would be something interesting to see, or just I would personally start with bamboo mat. Of course, that's obviously
I thought I'd start with My Little Pony, but to each his own. Well, I tell you how this would work. If you wanted to make something like this happen directly with CAS, it would take a school coming to us and saying, look, I've got 50 students, and 25 of them will commit to however many models, and then once we got prototype, maybe I don't know, it would have to be a school that came to us directly, that's got students that would want to make something like that happen, because just to kind of willy-nilly it out there, I could do it and come up with something that would be okay, but when you're talking about specific to the needs of a customer, it's it sounds like this is something that needs to be a little bit thought out. Coming up with your run-of-the-mill katana design, sure, any day of the week, but something like that, I'd want to talk to somebody a little bit more knowledgeable than myself, saying, because I would have specific questions about thicknesses and curvature and sori and all the fancy Japanese words that we use when we're trying to impress people that we know what we're talking about.
Fair enough. Well, I certainly don't have that, but it would be interesting because I do know there are schools. So if any of you are, if any of the Johns that ask me for very long swords are watching today, and you want to ping Patrick and give him measurements about your school's requirements for swords, then maybe he'll do it. And I would just say, definitely order 50 long bamboo mats.
Don't send me any designs. Don't send me any stuff like that. If you're part of a school that's got a sizable student, got a pretty good sizable student base, I'll talk to you. That's all I can promise. Ain't nothing wrong with talking.
Well, then I know we're coming up on a couple hour streaming here, Patrick. So I'll wrap it up with a couple last questions here, and maybe some from the chat. The last one I have for you is what do you wish people knew about swords before they bought them? If you could educate the community of sword buyers, what do you wish people had in their head?
How much time do we got?
Well, we got as long as you want to go. I figured you're 2 hours in a scratchy voice begging for tea was.
Well, there's a lot of things.
Just list your top 50.
I'm trying to get my top 5. No, I think everybody, before they try to purchase a sword, they need to research the sword that they think that they want. I think a lot of people buy katana, and it's a mistake. To me, owning a katana is like owning a firearm. You just can't stick it in the closet. You can't forget about it. I think a lot of people got this notion, that it's just going to be okay. It's just going to sit there and it's just going to be okay. No, it's not. It has to be tended. It's like a pet. You have to pay attention to it, and unless you have the right tools, the right chemicals and the right environment, it's not going to go well. This is why I do refer a lot of people to APOC. It's because you want a functional sword that you don't have to worry about. APOC, just in case. But if you've ever called CAS towards the end of the day, and you say, I'm interested in buying a sword, that call's going to get referred to me, and I'm going to sit here and I'm probably going to ask you 20 questions. And what do you plan on using it for? There's always going to be my number one question. And why do you think you need it? Answer those questions. Why do you think you need it first? What are you going to use it for? Why do you think you need it? And then we'll go from there. But I can't tell you, I have these conversations with people all the time, and it's just I get it. I mean, I understand owning a sword and holding a sword. It's kind of a transformative experience. It touches us into a part of, as a man, it touches a part of our psyche. I would like to make a Conan quote right here, but I'm going to resist the urge. But there's something about steel in your hands. Case knives. They haven't sold knives in decades. They sell nostalgia. They don't sell a pocket knife. They sell nostalgia. CAS doesn't sell swords. We sell fantasy in a lot of cases for most people, because they think that they got that katana, that they are now a part of some, and in essence they are. They're part of a larger community. They have a piece of history that connects them to a primal past that they may not have experienced any other way. Now things like Scottish Highland Games and Renaissance fairs and all that kind of stuff's kind of coming. It's kind of a thing. It's a little less nerdy. It's more popular, and so more and more people are getting introduced to swords and things like that. So that's a long way of saying, research what you think you want to buy and know more about it before you actually call me.
Fill your head with knowledge before you break bricks with it. That's a Simpsons quote. That's
yeah.
Well, that's fair advice. I honestly couldn't agree with you more. I invest a lot of time in trying to show people stuff on YouTube so that they can make smart decisions and have something to research. And so I wholeheartedly endorse the idea of think about what you want before you buy it and do some research.
Yeah, it's swords are not impulse buys. I mean, I'm sure they were during the pandemic, but they're not. I mean, they're little children that you have to take care of, and they're needy, and they require attention. And I would like to put a good sword into a good home with somebody that'll care about it. While operators are standing by right now to answer your call. Whether or not, everybody's at home this weekend, enjoying their weekend off. So you can call us on Monday at 8.
Well, all right. I don't see any questions that came through the chat here. So I will thank you for your time, Patrick. I'll stick around when we end here so that you can tell me the story of the axe and I can lose sleep over it. But
I was hoping you forgot about that.
I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for giving me 2 hours. Thank you for keeping me on the chat. It's much appreciated. And thank you everyone who watched and joined and contributed and chimed in. Much appreciated as well.
I would like to say, I'd like to thank everybody who listened to what I had to say for 2 hours, and my wife couldn't even handle that. So, and she has to live with me. So, but no, just people say a lot of stuff about us online, and some of it's fair criticism, some of it's not. And I just wish, people who are getting into swords understood a little bit more about, how these things come about, how they get to market, how, the challenge of actually getting a sword to to your doorstep, how big of a challenge that really is. And, there's how much effort goes into it. These, again, they're not being stamped out on a machine. And when you call us up or you post a comment, this sword is junk, you're not going to get a positive response. And there might be something wrong with it. It might be defective. And we might need to take a look at it. And we want to first identify that it's our product. And if you approach us from that direction, it's probably going to go better for you. So I'm a pretty easy, laid back guy. I don't try to get too excitable, but I'm always going to defend my people first. It's like, just appreciate that piece of steel that you got, because it's, someone put a lot of time, sweat, and effort in to make it. So, it's a special thing.
Some follow-up advice there, not to be a dick. That's
but they don't let me say that to the customers.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. As a person that words on the internet quite a bit and dispenses a fair amount of criticism, trying to be fair about it, objective, and hopefully the customers that are buying your swords and giving criticism are doing it in such a way that leads to a good sword and a good experience, right? Like if you're out there just to drive people into the ground or to make fun, then it's not fun really for anyone. But if you're genuinely trying to say, here's what I would like, here's what I wish it did, here's where I think it faltered.
It's legit.
Yeah.
It's legit.
We spent the first hour talking about Lucito and curled over thing. You didn't hang up on me or flick me off. So it seems like you can take criticism if it's fair.
Well, not everything's perfect. There is a human element here, made by hand. If we were stamping out widgets, it'd be a totally different thing. But, we could go on for another hour about it. But I would say, if anybody has any questions that weren't answered in the chat, if you would direct them to Matt, and whatever, any top 5 that seem to consistently emerge, I'll be glad to answer any questions post chat that you may have. I'm always open and available to answer questions.
Much appreciated. Well, thank you again, and thanks everyone. Cheers.